I'm here to share a moment with you of working in clay. This is actually the first video in a series that I'm making to share the techniques and the strategies of working with the pinch pot method. To start, I'm going to remove some clay from this block that I have here. You might be able to tell if you have worked with clay before by the way that this is angled, that I've been removing chunks of clay from this with the wire tool. So I'm going to do that right across here. And take my piece of clay off. Move that one over to the side. So what I have here is a chunk of clay that has edges and corners, making it more of a cube. I want to turn it into a sphere. In order to turn a cube into a sphere, we want to put pressure along the corners and edges by hitting or pressing so that they become equal with the sides that are flat. And in doing so, avoiding putting pressure or hitting or pressing on the flat parts. If I do this slowly, you can see that I'm just tapping with the base of my palm into the corners and edges. And I could switch sides. If I do this quickly, when I'm just doing it on my own, it looks like this. So the pinch pot method is probably the most basic. It's the method most people learn when they're trying out clay for the very first time, sometimes when they're a child. But if you use the pinch pot method strategically and you're aware of the variety of ways that you can use the method, you can actually get a really wide variety of shapes and use it in a really wide variety of ways. So the thing that I'm going to show you right now is actually just the most basic movement of your fingers, and I'm not going to show you anything beyond that. So keep it real simple. I'm going to hold the clay in my non-dominant hand, and then I'm going to take the thumb of my dominant hand and push into the middle of the ball of clay. And I want that to be as centered as possible. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is expand the bottom. Now this hole actually comes down to about right there. So there's maybe only about 1/4 inch of clay at the bottom of the hole. The next thing I'm going to do is press my thumb back into the hole of where it was. I'm going to demonstrate here in the air without the clay in my hands so that you can see what my fingers are doing. I'm going to make a sweeping motion away from the center with my thumb while I gradually turn the clay in my left hand. So it looks kind of like this when I'm doing it. So I'm pushing out with my thumb, turning the clay, and you'll notice that the very top of the opening right there doesn't really change much. It mostly stays the same perimeter, the same circumference that it had when I first made the hole with my thumb. It might open up a little bit. The part that's really transforming is the inside, the very bottom. So right now, the opening at the bottom is probably 3 or 4 times the circumference of the top, really opening it up. Now, sometimes when we do this for the first time, we're not really sure how to use our fingers in that way, and we end up making this part really wide. And that's okay. That's just part of exploring this motion when you're just getting started. But notice it. Notice when it happens. And the reason why you want to keep this small is so that this is thick, and then after you've expanded the bottom, you have the option of growing the vessel up to a taller shape or growing it outward into a more open shape. And it's just nice to have those options and to be able to use the technique with this kind of strategy in mind. When I am just making a pinch pot for fun and I'm not really thinking about the shape, it usually ends up being something like this. It'll be kind of like this sort of shape. You saw how I was using my thumb to expand the bottom? After I've expanded the bottom, I can start doing more of a pinching between my thumb and these fingers right there. So usually when we think of pinching, we think of drawing our fingertips together and squeezing. But when you're making a pinch pot, it's actually better if you think of your fingers as coming close to each other just enough so that it makes the thickness of the wall that you're wanting for the resulting piece. Because if you go further than that, you'll end up with really thin spots. And thin spots can actually mean that it will crack later. So I'm using my fingertips to feel, really feeling into the wall in all the areas where I'm putting pressure and pinching. And that thickness that I'm feeling with my fingers, that's information. And it's using that information that it's picking up along the way to inform how much to squeeze as it continues so that I can get an even shape. Now the whole time I'm doing this, whenever I feel a thick spot, I squeeze harder in that area, and when I feel a thin spot, I try to leave that part alone. And that's what will help you get a nice even wall. And like I mentioned, we're not thinking about the shape for this lesson, just thinking of the technique. If you decide you want to switch hands, that's totally fine. Sometimes your thumb gets tired. And if you want to set it down on the surface you're working on, pinch like this, you can do that. I usually don't do that unless I'm making like a dish. If the shape requires it, I like to hold it in my hand so that I can feel the shape that I'm making at the bottom. So you might be able to tell by now that the size of an object you're able to make with this technique is limited by the length from here to here. So you don't really ever see a really big vessel that was made using the pinch pot technique. Generally speaking, pinching is something that lends itself to handheld sizes. Well, that's about it for this lesson. I hope that there was something informative here for you. The other lessons are gonna just take it to the next step, and the steps beyond that. We're gonna talk about how to combine multiple pinch pots to make extended shapes that you might not associate with this method. We'll talk about working in the leather hard stage as well. So I hope you check those out if this is interesting to you. Thank you so much for watching. Have a good day.